Mornings at the Kenfield home always began the same way. Rebecca woke up first at exactly 6:30 without even waiting for her alarm clock to go off. She would gaze at her sleeping husband for a minute, then slip silently out from under the covers and head to the bathroom. At 7:15, she woke Nash with a light kiss on the temple, and half an hour later they were having breakfast in the kitchen, discussing their plans for the day. This morning was no different from any other. Outside, a light rain was falling, typical for autumn in Greenfield, the quiet town where they had lived for all 7 years of their marriage. Rebecca stirred honey into her oatmeal while Nash checked the news on his tablet. "It's Montgomery's birthday today," Nash said, without looking up from the screen. "Most likely, everyone will head to the Blue Oyster after work." "Are you going?" Rebecca asked, even though she already knew the answer. "I think so. It's awkward to say no. He is the department head after all." Nash worked as an engineer at Jackson Construction, a company that built commercial properties throughout the county. He was a good professional and respected by his colleagues. Rebecca was proud of him, although she sometimes thought he could be more ambitious. "Just don't stay out too late," she smiled to soften her request. "I'm on duty tomorrow at 8 and I don't want to be late." Rebecca worked as an administrator at Greenfield Medical Clinic. The job wasn't the highest paying, but it was stable and had good insurance. Plus, she could choose her shifts, which allowed her to treat Nash to home-cooked dinners from time to time. They had bought their house on Cedar Street right after they got married. It was a modest but cozy 3-bedroom house with a small yard. When they moved in, Rebecca imagined one of the bedrooms becoming a nursery. But years went by, and the room remained Nash's study. The topic of children came up less and less in their conversations. At first, they decided to wait until Nash's career became more stable. Then they put it off because of renovations in the house, then because of Rebecca's mother's illness, and then they just got used to life as a couple. "Becky, I think I'm going fishing with Paul on Saturday," Nash said, finishing his coffee. "If you don't mind." "Of course I don't mind," Rebecca replied. "I can stop by my mom's. She asked for help with her new phone." In fact, Rebecca was a little tired of these fishing trips. Nash was away almost every weekend, and she was left alone or visiting her mother in a nursing home. But she never mentioned it. Their marriage was too peaceful for such conversations. Sometimes it seemed to her that they were just neighbors living in the same house. They didn't fight, they hardly ever argued, but they didn't laugh like they used to. They didn't make plans, and they didn't talk about what was really bothering them. "I have to go," Nash said, standing up and kissing Rebecca on the cheek. "Don't forget, the plumber is coming today to check the pipes." "I remember," Rebecca nodded. "See you tonight." After her husband left, the house was filled with silence. Rebecca was in no hurry to get ready for work. Her shift didn't start until 10. She went to the window and looked out at the street. Her gaze fell on the house across the street. It was a yellow 2-story house with white shutters. It had been empty for the last 3 months. The previous neighbors had moved to California to be with their children. The night before, Rebecca had noticed that the lights were on in the house. That meant they finally had new neighbors. She studied the house for a minute, trying to spot signs of life. Judging by the moving van parked at the curb, they were still unpacking. Her day at work was business as usual. Phone calls, scheduling patients, filling out paperwork. By evening, Rebecca had a headache and was glad when her shift ended. While she was preparing dinner, broccoli and chicken casserole, Nash's favorite, the phone rang. "Becky, I'm going to be late." Her husband's voice sounded genuinely apologetic. "Montgomery insists that everyone stay." "That's okay," Rebecca replied, trying to hide her disappointment. "I'll put your dinner in the microwave." She ate dinner alone, watching another episode of a crime series on Netflix. Around 10 o'clock, she turned off the TV and went upstairs to take a shower and go to bed. Passing the window in the hallway, she noticed that the lights were on in the house across the street. Through the slightly open curtains, She could see the silhouettes of a man and a woman unpacking boxes in the living room. The woman was tall and slender with long hair pulled back into a messy bun. The man was strong with tattooed arms. Both looked young, probably the same age as Rebecca and Nash, or even younger. The new neighbors were clearly in no hurry to close the curtains, and Rebecca caught herself watching them longer than she should have. She suddenly felt a pang of envy. They looked so energetic, so lively. The woman was saying something, gesturing energetically, and the man was laughing, his arm around her shoulders. Rebecca didn't immediately hear the front door open. Nash had returned earlier than she expected. "Hey, why are you up?" he asked, climbing the stairs. "I was going to take a shower," Rebecca replied, stepping away from the window. "How was your evening?" "Fine," Nash shrugged. "Listen, I saw we have new neighbors." "Yes, it looks like they moved in today." "We should go over and say hello," Nash yawned. "Did you leave me dinner? It's in the microwave." Watching her husband go downstairs, Rebecca thought he hadn't even noticed her disappointment, or maybe he didn't want to. The next few days flew by unnoticed. Rebecca worked shifts and Nash stayed late at work because of a new project. They hardly saw each other, exchanging short messages and quick kisses before bed. On Friday, Rebecca came home from work earlier than usual. The clinic had canceled the evening appointments because Dr. Parrish was ill. The house was quiet and empty. Nash had texted that he was meeting Paul to discuss tomorrow's fishing trip and would be home late. Rebecca changed into her house clothes and started cooking. She turned on her favorite playlist and hummed along to the music as she chopped vegetables for a salad. Every now and then she glanced out the window overlooking her neighbor's backyard. The view was much better from this side. There was only a low fence between their houses. Her new neighbors, as it turned out, loved to spend time outdoors. They had a small pool, which they had already filled. Despite the cool weather, the man, Drew, as Rebecca heard when his wife called him, swam in it almost every day. There was no one in the yard now, but the lights were on in the house. Rebecca noticed that the neighbors were settling in quickly. Every day, new things appeared in the yard: garden furniture, a grill, solar-powered lanterns. Suddenly, the back door opened and a woman stepped out onto the terrace. Tall, with long dark hair down to her shoulders, she was wearing a long silk robe. She stopped at the edge of the pool, stretched, and then threw off her robe, standing naked. Rebecca froze with the knife in her hand. Focused on the cold salad, she didn't even have time to look away when the woman turned and their eyes met for a moment. Rebecca thought her new neighbor smiled slightly before gracefully diving into the water. Rebecca's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She quickly stepped away from the window, feeling awkward for having accidentally witnessed such an intimate moment. On the other hand, her neighbor had chosen to swim naked in a pool that was visible from several neighboring properties. When Nash returned home, it was already past midnight. He smelled of beer and cigarettes, a smell Rebecca had never liked. He muttered an apology and went straight to the bedroom. Rebecca remained on the sofa, pretending to watch a movie, but her thoughts were far away. 7 years of marriage. Had they been happy? Probably, yes. Their life was stable and comfortable, but sometimes it seemed to her that they were stuck in a rut they couldn't get out of. Every day was like the one before, and neither of them did anything to change it. Rebecca's gaze returned to the window. The lights were still on in the neighbor's house. She thought about the woman who had dived so freely into the pool, not caring about the stares of strangers. What was her life like? Was it as predictable as Rebecca's? For some reason, she doubted it. The next day, Nash left early in the morning to go fishing. Rebecca woke up to the sound of the front door closing. She lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling. She had the whole day ahead of her and didn't know how to fill it. After breakfast, she decided to do some gardening. The plants needed to be prepared for the approaching cold weather. Dressed in old jeans and a sweater, she went out to the backyard with a pair of pruning shears and gardening gloves. Working in the garden always calmed Rebecca. There was something meditative about removing dry branches and loosening the soil. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't immediately notice that someone was watching her. "Hello, neighbor," a woman's voice called out. Rebecca turned around. Standing at the fence was her new neighbor. Today she was wearing skinny jeans and a loose-fitting mustard-colored sweater. Up close, she looked younger than she had from a distance, maybe 30. "Hi," Rebecca replied, pulling off her gloves. "I'm Eloise Meredith," the woman smiled, holding out her hand over the fence. "My husband and I just moved in." "Rebecca Canfield." Rebecca shook the outstretched hand. "Welcome to Greenfield." "Thank you. Drew and I have already fallen in love with this neighborhood. It's so quiet after the city center." "Did you live downtown?" "Yes, in Riverside," Eliza nodded. "But it got too noisy. We decided to find something quieter." The conversation flowed easily. Eliza said she worked as a massage therapist at a spa, and her husband was a bartender at the Essence Club who dreamed of opening his own place. They had been married for 4 years and weren't planning on having children yet. They wanted to enjoy their time together. Rebecca found herself thinking that Eloise radiated a special energy. She spoke quickly, laughed often, and looked her straight in the eye. And there was something else, something Rebecca couldn't quite put her finger on. "Is your husband home?" Eloise asked. "No, he's gone fishing with a friend," Rebecca replied. "He'll be back tomorrow evening." "Oh, so you're free all weekend?" Eloise's eyes lit up. "Drew and I are having a little barbecue tonight. Why don't you join us?" Rebecca hesitated. She didn't usually like such spontaneous invitations, preferring quiet evenings at home, but something in Eloise's smile made her nod. "I'd love to," she said. "What time?" 7 o'clock? Eloise suggested. "Nothing fancy, just steaks and wine. Drew is a great cook." "I'll be there at 7, Rebecca smiled. "Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself," Eloise winked. "And maybe some good vibes." When her neighbor left, Rebecca caught herself smiling. The sudden invitation disrupted her usual weekend routine, and she felt a slight excitement. Maybe new acquaintances were exactly what she and Nash had been missing lately. Rebecca spent the rest of the day thinking about what to wear to the barbecue and glancing out the window at her neighbor's house. Once, she noticed Drew setting up a new grill on the patio. He was tall and muscular with tattoos on both arms. His dark hair was pulled back into a messy bun. Rebecca thought that he and Eloise looked like a couple out of a glossy magazine, too beautiful for the quiet suburb of Greenfield. By 7 o'clock, Rebecca was ready. She chose a simple dark blue dress and minimal makeup. Grabbing a bottle of wine, despite Eloise's words she didn't want to arrive empty-handed, she headed over to the neighbor's house. Drew opened the door. Up close, he looked even more attractive. Regular features, warm brown eyes, light stubble. "You must be Rebecca," he smiled, holding out his hand. "Welcome. I'm Drew." "Nice to meet you," Rebecca said, shaking his hand, feeling slightly awkward. "I brought some wine. I hope it's okay." "Perfect." Drew took the bottle. "Come on in. Eloise is in the kitchen." The Merediths' house was more spacious inside than it looked from the outside. They had already furnished it with minimalist furniture, a few abstract paintings on the walls and lots of potted plants. Eloise met her in the kitchen, cutting vegetables for a salad. She was wearing a simple black dress that accentuated her slender figure. "Rebecca!" She put down the knife and came over to hug her guest. "I'm so glad you came." The evening began with an aperitif on the terrace. The pool glowed softly in the twilight. Drew had installed underwater lights to create the atmosphere of a luxurious spa. Rebecca learned that the Merediths had moved to Greenfield because of Eloise's job. She had been offered a position at the renowned Lotus Spa. "How long have you lived here?" Eloise asked, filling Rebecca's glass with wine. 7 years since Nash and I got married, Rebecca replied. 7 years, Drew whistled. And you still love each other? The question sounded like a joke, but Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. Of course, she replied. It's just, well, routine sets in. Oh, we know, Eliza nodded, exchanging glances with her husband. That's why you need to shake things up from time to time. As the evening progressed, Rebecca felt more and more at ease. The wine was excellent, Drew's steaks were juicy, and the company was unexpectedly pleasant. The Merediths told amusing stories about their life in Riverside, about their travels, about Eloise's strange clients and the patrons of the bar where Drew worked. When the clock struck 11, Rebecca realized with surprise that she didn't want to leave, but propriety demanded that she not overstay her welcome with her new acquaintances. I think I should be going, she said, getting up. Thank you for a wonderful evening. Already? Eloise pouted playfully. We're just getting started. We still have a bottle of wine open, Drew added, gesturing for her to sit back down. Rebecca hesitated. It had been a long time since she had spent time so casually. On the other hand, she hardly knew these people. Half an hour, she decided, sinking back into her chair. Half an hour stretched into another hour. They moved to the living room where Drew turned on some soft music. The conversation became more and more candid. The Merediths told her that they had met at a music festival and it was love at first sight. We eloped to Vegas 3 weeks after we met, Eloise laughed. Our parents were shocked. How did you and Nash meet? Drew asked, leaning closer. Much less romantic, Rebecca smiled. Mutual friends, a few dates, meeting the parents, all very traditional. But that's so sweet, Eloise said, placing her hand on Rebecca's knee. Stability, security. There's a romance in that, too. It was already past midnight when Rebecca finally said goodbye to her new neighbors. Eliza insisted on walking her home, even though it was only a few steps across the street. Thanks for tonight, Rebecca said at her door. I haven't had such a good time in a long time. Same here. Eliza leaned in and quickly kissed Rebecca on the cheek. Feel free to come over any time. Our door is always open for you. Lying in bed, Rebecca thought about her new acquaintances. They were so alive, free, not at all like the people she usually associated with, and that freedom attracted her like a magnet. In the morning, she woke up with a slight hangover and a strange feeling of anxiety. It seemed to her that last night was some kind of violation of the unwritten rules of her marriage. But on the other hand, what was wrong with spending time with her neighbors while her husband was fishing? The day passed as usual. Rebecca went to the store, prepared dinner for Nash's return, and even managed to watch a movie she had been putting off for a long time. Several times she approached the window overlooking the neighbor's yard, but saw no one. It was only after dinner that she noticed Drew cleaning the pool. Nash returned in the evening, tired but happy. He talked excitedly about the fish he had caught and how he and Paul had sat around the campfire drinking beer. Rebecca listened, smiling at the right moments, but her mind was far away. How was your evening with the neighbors? Nash asked as they ate dinner. Fine, Rebecca replied, trying to sound neutral. They're an interesting couple. Eloise is a massage therapist and Drew is a bartender. Nash raised an eyebrow. Not exactly typical Greenfield residents. What do you mean? Well, it's mostly office workers, teachers, doctors, a more conservative crowd. Is that a bad thing? Rebecca felt irritated by her husband's words for some reason. No, just an observation, Nash shrugged. I hope they settle in well. The next week passed in the usual rhythm. Rebecca and Nash went to work, had dinner together, watched TV, or did their own thing. He fixed something in the garage or worked on projects. She read or talked to her friends on the phone. But now there was something new in this routine, observing the neighbors. Rebecca didn't do it on purpose. Just passing by the window or cooking dinner in the kitchen, she now found herself glancing at the Meredith's house more often. And she saw them a lot. Eloise loved to be in the garden, planting things, hanging lanterns, just sitting in a deck chair with a book. Drew was more often seen in the evenings or early in the morning when he swam in the pool before work. Gradually, Rebecca noticed that her neighbors didn't seem to mind being seen. Eloise often sunbathed topless, and Drew would come out into the yard wearing only swimming trunks or even nothing at all. They rarely drew the curtains in the house. Even in the evenings and through the slightly open blinds, Rebecca could sometimes see them hugging in the living room or kissing in the kitchen. At first, it made her feel uncomfortable and she would turn away. But gradually her curiosity got the better of her. She began to linger at the window, hoping to see her neighbors. And when she did, she didn't rush to look away. On Thursday evening, when Nash was late again from work, Rebecca noticed that the Merediths were having another barbecue. This time they had guests, another couple about their age. All four sat on the terrace drinking wine and chatting happily. At one point, Eloise got up and, to Rebecca's surprise, took off her bikini top before diving into the pool. Drew soon joined her, also naked. Their guests followed suit, and soon all four were swimming in the pool without any clothes on, glasses in hand, laughing and splashing around like children. Rebecca couldn't look away. She knew it was wrong to spy on people at such an intimate moment, but something kept her from moving away from the window. Maybe it was envy of their freedom, of how carefree they were about life, or something else, more personal, more forbidden. Suddenly, Eloise turned her head and looked straight at Rebecca's window. Their eyes met across the space between the houses. Rebecca froze, expecting her neighbor to be embarrassed or angry. But instead, Eloise smiled and raised her glass as if to greet her. Then she said something to the others, and all four turned toward Rebecca's window and waved. Rebecca panicked and backed away from the window, feeling the blood rush to her cheeks. They knew she was watching. Not only were they not embarrassed, but they seemed to be enjoying it. What did they think of her? That she was some kind of pervert, peeping at her neighbors? Or were they just so free of convention that it didn't bother them at all? The next day, on her way home from work, Rebecca ran into Eloise at the mailboxes. For a second, she thought about pretending she hadn't noticed her neighbor, but it was too late. Eliza waved at her. "Hi, neighbor," she smiled. "How's it going?" "Fine, thanks," Rebecca replied, trying to sound casual. "How about you?" "Great. Listen, would you and Nash like to come over tonight? Drew is making some amazing cocktails." Rebecca hesitated. Part of her wanted to accept, but another, more rational part reminded her of the strange episode the previous evening. "Thanks for the invitation, but I can't tonight," she replied. "Maybe another time?" "Sure." Eloise didn't seem disappointed. "The offer still stands. For both of you, or just you if Nash is busy." She said the last words with a slight smile that could have been either completely innocent or full of hidden meaning. That evening, as Rebecca was washing the dishes after dinner, her gaze involuntarily turned to the window again. The lights were dim in the Meredith's house. Through the loosely drawn curtains, she could see Eloise sitting on the sofa with a book. She was wearing only a light silk robe, which she had not bothered to fasten completely. Drew was sitting next to her with his hand on her knee, whispering something in her ear. At that moment, Eloise looked up and met Rebecca's gaze. She didn't look surprised, as if she knew or sensed that she was being watched. Instead of buttoning her robe or turning away, she smiled slowly and stroked her husband's hand, keeping her eyes fixed on Rebecca. Then she leaned toward Drew and said something to him. He turned his head toward the window, smiled, and waved. Rebecca quickly backed away into the kitchen, feeling a strange mixture of embarrassment and excitement. This was no longer an accident. They knew she was watching, and they were deliberately letting her do it. What's more, they seemed to be enjoying it. Who are you talking to? Nash's voice, coming from the kitchen, made her jump. No one, Rebecca replied quickly, just thinking out loud. Nash looked at her strangely but didn't ask any questions. He poured himself a glass of water and returned to the living room to watch the basketball game. Rebecca remained in the kitchen, trying to make sense of her feelings. What was going on? She had always considered herself a normal, even conservative woman, a faithful wife. Why was she now so attracted to her neighbors' lives? Why did she want to watch them? And why did they seem to encourage it? For the next few days, Rebecca tried not to look at the Meredith's house. She drew the curtains in the kitchen when she was cooking and quickly walked past the windows facing their yard. But it took constant willpower, and sometimes she forgot. On Wednesday evening, when Nash was at a company dinner and Rebecca had just returned from work, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, she saw Eloise with a bottle of wine in her hands. "Hi," her neighbor smiled. "I thought I'd keep you company since you're home alone tonight." Rebecca hesitated. Part of her wanted to slam the door and hide, but another, stronger part of her craved this encounter. "Sure," she said, stepping back to let Eloise in. "I was just about to have dinner." "Great!" Eloise entered the house. She was wearing a simple summer dress that accentuated her slender figure. "I can help if you want." They went into the kitchen where Rebecca began to prepare pasta with vegetables. Eloise opened a bottle of wine and poured it into glasses. The conversation flowed easily as they discussed work, books, and music. But Rebecca sensed a tension in the air, a kind of unspoken expectation. "I saw how you were looking at us," Eloise said suddenly as they sat down at the table with dinner ready. "Are you interested?" Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. "I don't know what you mean," she said, trying to deny the obvious. "It's okay," Eloise smiled softly. "We don't mind. In fact, we like it." "What exactly?" Rebecca realized there was no way out and decided to be honest. "That you're watching us." Eloise took a sip of wine, keeping her eyes on Rebecca. "It's exciting." The word hung in the air between them. Rebecca didn't know how to respond. She never thought she'd find herself in this situation. "I didn't mean to intrude on your privacy," she finally said. "But you did." Eloise leaned closer. "And you're still doing it. And you know what? It's perfectly normal. Human curiosity is a wonderful thing." Rebecca was silent, pondering her neighbor's words. Was it really normal? Or had she crossed some line into something forbidden? "Drew and I value our freedom," Eloise continued. "Life is too short to limit yourself with conventions. If you like watching, watch. If you want more, just say so." "More?" Rebecca asked, even though she knew exactly what Eloise meant. "Join us," Eloise replied simply. "Not necessarily for, well, we can just swim in the pool, drink wine, talk, no strings attached." Rebecca felt her heart beating in her throat. "I'm married," she said, as if that explained everything. "So what?" Eloise shrugged. "Nash can come too. We don't mind. Or just you, if he's not interested. It's your choice." "I don't think it's a good idea." Rebecca shook her head, even though something inside her was screaming the opposite. "Whatever you say." Eloise didn't seem hurt or disappointed. "The offer still stands. No pressure, no expectations. Just an opportunity to explore." The rest of dinner passed in a strangely normal atmosphere. They talked about Eloise's work, Drew's plans to open his bar, how much they liked Greenfield. But beneath the ordinariness, Rebecca sensed tension, as if something invisible stretched between them. When Eloise left, Rebecca stood at the window for a long time, looking at the neighbor's house. The light was on in the bedroom, and she could see the silhouettes of Drew and Eloise. They hadn't closed the curtains, as if inviting her to watch, and she watched, feeling conflicting emotions battle inside her: shame, excitement, curiosity, fear. Something had changed in her world, something that could no longer be ignored or denied. She was on the verge of a choice that could change her whole life. And the strangest thing was that part of her was looking forward to it. Rebecca struggled with herself for several days. After her frank conversation with Eloise, she tried to look less toward her neighbor's house and pay more attention to Nash and their relationship. But her thoughts kept returning to Eloise's words, to that tempting offer that continued to echo in her head. On Friday evening, Nash announced that he was going fishing with Paul again on Saturday. They were planning to leave early in the morning and not return until Sunday evening. Something in her husband's tone made Rebecca wonder if he really enjoyed fishing that much, or if it was just an excuse to get away from their measured, almost lifeless routine. "You don't mind, do you?" Nash asked, packing his things into a backpack. "I can stay if you want." "No, it's fine," Rebecca replied, noticing how he breathed a sigh of relief. "Have fun." Saturday morning greeted her with the silence of an empty house. Nash had left before dawn, leaving a short note on the kitchen table. "I'll call you tonight. Love, N." Rebecca made herself some coffee and sat down by the window, watching Greenfield wake up. Her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Eloise. "Good morning, neighbor. Saw Nash leave. Any plans for today?" Rebecca stared at the screen, unsure of how to respond. After a moment's hesitation, she wrote, "Nothing special. How about you?" The reply came almost instantly. "Drew is making an amazing breakfast. Want to join us?" It was so simple. Just breakfast. Nothing wrong with that, nothing dangerous. Just breakfast with the neighbors on a Saturday morning. "I'd love to." "When?" "Right now. Just come over." Rebecca went up to her bedroom to get changed. She took off her pajamas and looked critically at herself in the mirror. At 35, her body was still slim, although the first signs of age were appearing. Light wrinkles around her eyes, slightly less firm skin. She chose a light summer dress, not too revealing but not too modest either. A little perfume, light makeup, nothing special, just enough to look decent for a visit to the neighbors. When she approached the Meredith's house, her heart was beating in her throat. What was she doing? Why? Just breakfast, she reminded herself. Nothing more. The door was opened by Drew, wearing only jeans, no shirt. His torso was covered with intricate tattoos, abstract patterns, intertwining lines, some kind of symbols. "Rebecca," he smiled broadly. "Come in. I'm just finishing the pancakes." The kitchen smelled of coffee, fresh pastries, and something citrusy. Eloise was sitting at the table looking at something on her tablet. She was wearing only a long t-shirt that barely covered her hips. She looked up and smiled. "Hi, neighbor. I'm so glad you came. Coffee? Or shall we go straight to the mimosa?" She pointed to a pitcher of orange juice and a bottle of champagne. "Coffee first," Rebecca smiled, sitting down at the table. "It's too early for alcohol." "It's never too early for happiness," Drew winked, placing a steaming cup of coffee in front of her. Breakfast was relaxed. Drew's pancakes were truly delicious, thin, filled with fresh berries and maple syrup. They talked about music, movies, and their favorite places in the city. No hints, no double meanings, just pleasant conversation over a good breakfast. After the meal, Drew gathered the dishes and began washing them, while Eloise offered Rebecca a tour of the house. "You've only seen the kitchen and the living room," she said. "We have a lot more interesting things to see." The Meredith's house was smaller than the Canfields, but it was more modern in design. Open spaces, lots of light, minimalist decor. Eloise led Rebecca through the living room to the study, where Drew was working on his future bar project. Sketches, calculations, sample menus. "He's serious about this idea," Eloise said tenderly. "He's saving money and researching the market. I believe he'll succeed." Then they went upstairs. There were 2 bedrooms, a guest room, simply but tastefully furnished, and the master bedroom. "And here's our private space," Eloise said, opening the door to the bedroom. The room was large, with a huge bed in the middle. One wall was entirely glass, overlooking the backyard and the pool. The curtains were drawn, and Rebecca suddenly realized that this was the window she had often looked out of from her home. "The view from here is beautiful," said Eloise, approaching the window, "especially in the evening when the lights come on." Rebecca moved closer, looking at her house from a new perspective. From here, she could clearly see the Kenfield's kitchen and living room windows. She suddenly felt strange, realizing that the Merediths might have been watching her as she watched them. "We can all see each other," Eloise said quietly, as if reading her mind. "There's a beauty in that, don't you think? To watch and be watched." Rebecca didn't answer, but something in her expression must have betrayed her thoughts, because Eloise smiled and added, "Don't worry, we respect your privacy. We only look when we know it's mutual." After the tour, they returned to the kitchen where Drew had finished washing the dishes and was making more coffee. "What do you think of our humble abode?" he asked, handing Rebecca a cup. "It's very cozy," she replied, "and the view from the bedroom is amazing." "Yes, we chose this house specifically for the view," Drew smiled, exchanging glances with Eloise. Time flew by. After coffee, Eloise suggested relaxing by the pool. The day promised to be warm, despite it being autumn. "I don't have a swimsuit with me," Rebecca remarked. "Oh, that's no problem," Eloise laughed. "You can borrow one of mine. Or—" She paused, smiling meaningfully. "Or?" Rebecca asked, although she knew perfectly well what her neighbor meant. "Or we could follow our tradition," Drew finished. "No swimsuits, no conventions. Just water, sun, and freedom." Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. Part of her wanted to leave immediately, to return to the safety of her home. But another part, stronger and more curious, wanted to stay, wanted to experience what the Merediths were offering, the freedom she could only dream of. "I think I'll take my swimsuit after all," she said after a pause. "For starters." "For starters," Eloise nodded understandingly. "Of course." Eloise's swimsuit was too revealing for Rebecca's standards, a tiny bikini that barely covered the essentials. But she put it on, feeling strangely excited by this unfamiliar boldness. The pool was heated and the water was pleasantly warm. Rebecca plunged in, feeling the tension of the last few days gradually melt away. Eloise, true to her principles, swam naked. Drew put on his swimming trunks at first, but soon he too discarded them. Strangely, Rebecca didn't feel uncomfortable. Something about the atmosphere created by the Merediths made everything feel natural and normal. They didn't focus on their nakedness or make a show of it. They just enjoyed the water, the sun, and each other's company. Mimosas flowed freely, and soon Rebecca felt pleasantly intoxicated. Not enough to lose control, but enough to relax and let go of many of her inhibitions and fears. When Eloise offered her a massage, "Professional, don't worry," Rebecca agreed without hesitation. She lay down on the deck chair and Eloise's hands began to work on her shoulders and back, finding knots of tension Rebecca didn't even know existed. "You're all tense," Eloise said softly, kneading her muscles. "So much tension. You have to learn to let it go, allow yourself to relax." Eliza's hands were warm and strong. She knew what she was doing, and soon Rebecca felt her body become light, almost weightless. "Sometimes people think too much about what's right and what's wrong," Eliza continued, "and they forget to just live, feel, enjoy the moment." Rebecca lay with her eyes closed, absorbing every word, every touch. Somewhere on the edge of her consciousness, a thought flashed that she was crossing a line, that this was wrong. But for some reason, it seemed so insignificant, so distant now. The day slipped into evening almost imperceptibly. They had dinner on the terrace. Drew grilled steaks. Eloise made a salad and opened a bottle of red wine. The conversation flowed easily, jumping from topic to topic. Rebecca couldn't remember the last time she had felt so comfortable with someone other than Nash. Even with him, though, their conversations had been more business than pleasure lately. "It's late," Rebecca remarked, glancing at her watch. It was almost midnight. "I think I should go." "Stay," Eloise suggested. "The guest bedroom is all yours. If you want, of course." Rebecca hesitated. Spend the whole night at the Meredith's house? What would Nash think if he found out? Although how would he find out? He was fishing and wouldn't be back until tomorrow evening. "I don't know." "No pressure," Drew said gently. "It's just an offer. If you're more comfortable at home, we understand." Something about this freedom of choice, this lack of pressure, finally convinced Rebecca. "I'll stay," she decided, "but only for the night." "Only for the night," Eloise repeated with a smile. "We promise we won't kidnap you." The guest bedroom was cozy and spacious. Eloise brought Rebecca a clean towel and one of her nightgowns, silk, cool to the touch. "Good night," she said, standing in the doorway. "And thank you for staying. We enjoy your company." When the door closed, Rebecca sat down on the bed, trying to make sense of everything that had happened that day. She had spent almost 12 hours with people she barely knew, and she felt more comfortable with them than she had with anyone in a long time. They had offered her the freedom she had so desperately lacked in her life with Nash, the freedom to be herself without judgment or expectations. Muffled voices and quiet laughter came from the next room. Rebecca lay down on the bed, listening. What were they talking about? About her? About their plans? She imagined them together, beautiful, free, happy, and she felt not jealousy or envy, but a desire to be a part of it. In the morning, Rebecca woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and toast. She quickly got dressed and went down to the kitchen, where Eloise was already setting the table. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she smiled. "How did you sleep?" "Surprisingly well," Rebecca admitted. "I haven't slept this well in a long time." Drew joined them a few minutes later, fresh from the shower, his hair still damp. "What are your plans for the day?" he asked, pouring himself some coffee. "I need to go back home," Rebecca replied. "I have a few things to do before Nash gets back." "Of course," Eloise nodded, "but you can always come back. Our door is always open for you." After breakfast, Rebecca got ready to leave. At the door, Eloise hugged her, and the hug lasted a little longer than it should have between mere neighbors. Drew hugged her too, his hand lingering on her waist for a second. "See you," he said with a smile that promised much more than just neighborly conversation. When she got home, Rebecca's first priority was to take a shower, washing away the smells of the Meredith's house, the chlorine from the pool, the scent of their shampoo, the faint smell of smoke from the grill. Then she got busy with her chores, trying to get back to normal, but something had changed. Now the usual tasks seemed even more monotonous, even more empty. In the evening, Nash called to say that he and Paul would be late. The fishing was great and they wanted to stay out longer. Rebecca assured him that everything was fine and wished him good luck fishing. After hanging up, she went to the window and looked at her neighbor's house. Eloise and Drew were swimming in the pool, naked as always. Eloise saw her at the window and waved her over to join them. Rebecca shook her head but didn't move from the window. She continued to watch as Eloise got out of the pool. Drew handed her a towel and they kissed openly, knowing they were being watched. The phone in her hand vibrated. A message from Eloise. "We miss you. Come over if you want. Or just watch. We like both." Rebecca didn't reply, but she didn't move from the window either. She watched the Merediths go into the house, the light come on in their bedroom, and them continue what they had started by the pool, not closing the curtains, allowing her to see everything. It was strange, wrong, forbidden, and incredibly exciting. Nash returned on Sunday evening, tired but happy. He talked about the fish he had caught, the beauty of the lake, and how he and Paul were planning their next trip. Rebecca listened, smiled, and asked questions. But her thoughts were far away, in the house across the street with the people who had shown her a different life, different possibilities. "You seem strange," Nash remarked as they were getting ready for bed. "Is everything okay?" "Sure," Rebecca replied quickly. "I'm just tired. I got a lot done over the weekend." Nash nodded, clearly satisfied with her answer. He didn't notice, or didn't want to notice, the tension emanating from her, the inner struggle that was tearing her apart. In mid-October, Nash told Rebecca he was going to a 2-day work seminar in a neighboring town. It was unexpected. He usually told her about these trips in advance, but Rebecca didn't ask any questions. The last few weeks of their relationship had been tense. After that conversation at dinner, they had been walking on eggshells, avoiding serious topics and limiting themselves to formal pleasantries about the weather and work. "I'll be back Saturday evening," Nash said as he packed his bag. "I'll call you when I leave." "Okay," Rebecca nodded, pretending to be absorbed in her book. "Have a good seminar." After he left, she immediately texted Eloise. Over the past month, it had become a habit. As soon as Nash left, she let her neighbors know she was free. Sometimes she would just drop in for a glass of wine and a chat. Sometimes she would stay the night, and sometimes they would come to her, enjoying the forbidden excitement of being in someone else's house. "Nash is away at a seminar until tomorrow evening," she wrote. "Any plans?" The reply came a minute later. "We just got back from the spa. We have a bottle of Prosecco and are in the mood for company. Come over when you're ready." Rebecca spent the rest of the day in pleasant anticipation. She went to the salon where she got a manicure and a new hairstyle, bought new lingerie and a dress that accentuated her figure. Spontaneous purchases and trips to the salon had become the norm for her lately. She wanted to please the Meridams. She wanted to feel their admiring glances. In the evening, she put on her new dress, applied her makeup, and, leaving only the light in the hallway on, crossed the street. Drew met her at the door with a glass of Prosecco in his hand. "Wow," he whistled, looking her up and down admiringly. "You look stunning." Eloise also appreciated her efforts. "New dress?" she asked, hugging Rebecca. "It looks great on you." "Turn around, I want to see it from all angles." Rebecca obediently turned around, feeling her cheeks burn under their intense gaze. "Approved," Eliza smiled. "Right, Drew?" "Absolutely," he nodded, handing Rebecca a glass. "To beauty." The evening began with dinner on the terrace. Eloise had prepared pasta with seafood and Drew opened another bottle of wine. The conversation flowed easily and naturally. They discussed music, movies, and the latest city gossip. Not a word about Nash, not a hint that Rebecca had done anything wrong or forbidden. After dinner, Drew suggested they move to the pool. "I've already turned on the heat," he said. "The water should be perfect." It was a cool October evening, but the pool was indeed warm, with a light mist rising above it. Eloise had already taken off her robe and dived into the water. Drew followed her example. Rebecca hesitated for a second. She had always kept her swimsuit on, even when the Meredith swam naked. It was a kind of last frontier she hadn't dared to cross. But today, something had changed. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was her new dress and hairstyle. Or maybe it was just a desire to finally become part of their world, their freedom. She slowly took off her dress, then her underwear, feeling their eyes on her. And for the first time, it didn't embarrass her. On the contrary, it filled her with a strange, new feeling of power. "Finally," Eliza smiled as Rebecca entered the water. "We've been waiting for this moment." The water enveloped her body, creating the illusion of weightlessness. Rebecca swam between Eloise and Drew, feeling their touch, hearing their laughter, seeing their admiring glances. It was intoxicating. To be desired, to be free, to be a different Rebecca, not the one who was with Nash. They drank champagne right in the pool from crystal glasses that Drew had placed on the edge. They talked about travel, about dreams, about things they wanted to try in life. Rebecca talked about her unfulfilled plans, to become an artist, to travel the world, to live in a small house by the sea. "Why unfulfilled?" asked Eloise. "You can still do all that." "How?" Rebecca smiled bitterly. "I have a stable job, a mortgage, a husband. It's not that easy to just drop everything and start from scratch." "Sometimes you have to do just that," Drew said thoughtfully. "Break the old to build the new." Gradually, the conversation died down, giving way to music, touches, glances. Rebecca felt the distance between them growing smaller, the last barriers crumbling away. She knew that tonight she would cross the line she had been afraid to cross all this time, and she was ready for it. Eloise kissed her first, lightly, almost chastely, tentatively. Rebecca froze for a moment but then responded, feeling a shiver of excitement run through her body. Drew moved closer, his hand sliding down her waist. It all happened so naturally, as if they had rehearsed it many times. And then suddenly, a bright light flashed in the yard and Nash's voice rang out, "Rebecca?" She spun around. Nash was standing at the fence, clutching a bouquet of flowers. His face was contorted with shock and disbelief. "Nash," she breathed, trying to comprehend what was happening. "What are you—" "You were supposed to come back tomorrow." "The seminar was canceled." His voice was icy. "I wanted to surprise you. The neighbors said they saw you come here." Rebecca didn't know what to say. Her mind was blank. She covered herself with her hands as if that could change anything. Nash threw the bouquet on the ground and turned to leave. "Wait!" Rebecca shouted, climbing out of the pool. She grabbed Eloise's robe and quickly threw it on. "Nash, wait!" But he was already walking toward the gate without looking back. Rebecca ran after him, feeling the water running down her legs, the cold October wind piercing even through her robe. "Nash, please, let's talk." She caught up with him at the exit of the Meredith's yard. "I can explain." "What exactly can you explain?" He finally turned around and Rebecca almost recoiled from the look on his face. "Why is my wife naked in the pool with our neighbors? Why is she kissing another woman while some tattooed bartender gropes her?" It's not what you think," Rebecca said weakly, realizing how ridiculous it sounded. "What am I supposed to think?" His voice broke. "God, Rebecca, we've been married for 7 years. 7 years. I thought we were fine." "Things haven't been fine for a very long time," she said quietly. "We were just pretending that everything was okay." Nash shook his head. "We had a normal marriage. Maybe not perfect, but normal. And you? What have you been doing? How long has this been going on?" Rebecca was silent, not knowing how to respond. How could she explain that it had all started with simple curiosity, with observation, with admiration for a freedom she had never had? How could she tell him about her gradual descent into another world, another life? "It doesn't matter," Nash said after a pause. "I'm going home. Pack your things and leave. I don't want to see you." He strode across the street to their house. Rebecca remained standing at the Meredith's gate, shivering from the cold and shock. "Rebecca?" Eloise's voice brought her out of her stupor. "Are you okay?" She turned around. Eloise and Drew were standing on the terrace, already dressed, their faces worried. "I don't know," Rebecca replied honestly. "I think my marriage just ended." "Go inside," Eloise said gently. "You'll freeze. We can talk inside." Rebecca shook her head. "No, I have to go home. Talk to Nash. Try to explain everything." "Are you sure?" Drew asked. "Maybe you should give him some time to cool off." "No," Rebecca said firmly. "I have to do this now." She returned to the Meredith's house, quickly got dressed, and, refusing their offer to walk her home, crossed the street to her house. Nash was sitting in the kitchen with a glass of whiskey in front of him. "I thought you were staying with them," he said, not looking at her. Rebecca sat down opposite him. "I want to explain." "What is there to explain?" He took a sip. "You cheated on me, with the neighbors, both of them." "I didn't sleep with them," Rebecca said quietly. "At least until tonight. Nothing happened." "But it would have if I hadn't come back," he said, not asking a question but making a statement. Rebecca was silent. They both knew the answer. "Why?" Nash finally asked. "What were you missing?" "Life," she replied simply. "Passion. Freedom. We've become roommates, Nash. We don't talk. We don't laugh. We don't love each other. We just exist next to each other. And instead of telling me that, you decided to dive naked into the pool with the neighbors." His sarcasm hurt, but Rebecca knew she deserved it. "I tried to talk to you. Many times. But you didn't hear me. You were happy with our life. Work, fishing, TV. And I felt like I was dying inside. Day after day, year after year." Nash was silent for a long time, twirling his glass in his hands. "Maybe you're right," he finally said. "Maybe we really aren't a couple anymore, but that doesn't excuse your betrayal." "I know," Rebecca nodded. "And I'm very sorry." "Sorry isn't enough," Nash shook his head. "I want you to leave, today. Pack your things and go." "Where?" Rebecca asked, confused. "I don't care," he replied harshly. "Go to your parents. Go to your girlfriend. Go to your lovers. Just go." Rebecca went up to her bedroom and started packing her things. Her hands were shaking and her eyes were filled with tears. She didn't know if she was crying out of grief, shame, or fear of the unknown future. Probably all of the above. When she came downstairs with her bag, Nash was still sitting in the kitchen. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said. "We need to discuss what to do next." He didn't answer, didn't even look at her. Rebecca stood there for another second, then left the house, closing the door behind her. She didn't go to the Merediths. Despite their invitation, it seemed wrong to rush over to them after what had happened. Instead, she got in her car and drove to her old friend Carol, who lived in a neighboring town. The next few days passed in a blur. Rebecca called work and took a vacation, saying she had family problems. She spent most of her time in Carol's guest room, staring at the ceiling and thinking about how her life had fallen apart so quickly. On the third day, Nash called. His voice was tired but no longer angry. "We need to talk," he said. "About the future." They met at a cafe in the city center. Nash looked haggard and older. Rebecca suspected she didn't look any better. "I think we should get a divorce," he said without preamble. "What happened?" "It's over, Rebecca. I can't forget or forgive." She nodded. She knew he was right. "We'll have to sell the house," Nash continued. "I don't want to stay there. Too many memories." They discussed practical matters, how to divide their property, what to do about their joint accounts, when to start the divorce proceedings. It all felt strangely businesslike, almost detached, as if they were talking about someone else's lives, not their own. "Have you talked to them yet?" Nash asked suddenly. "No," Rebecca shook her head. "Not since, well, you know. Do you like them?" There was a strange curiosity in his voice. "Or is it just physical?" Rebecca thought about it. What did she feel for the Merediths? Admiration, passion, love? Or were they just a symbol of the freedom she so desperately wanted? "I don't know," she replied honestly. "They showed me a different life, different possibilities. And yes, I like them. Both of them." Nash nodded as if this confirmed something he already suspected. "You know, I've noticed that our marriage is dying too," he admitted. "I just didn't want to see it. It was easier to pretend that everything was fine." "I'm to blame too," Rebecca said. "I should have been more honest with you. From the very beginning." They parted almost amicably, agreeing to meet with lawyers in a week to begin the formal divorce proceedings. Rebecca returned to Carol, but with a clearer understanding of what lay ahead. She needed to find a new place to live, maybe even a new job, start her life over. She still hadn't contacted the Merediths, even though they wrote to her every day, asking how she was, offering help, inviting her to come back. Part of her wanted that, to return to the freedom, the excitement she had felt with them. But another part understood that she needed to figure herself out first, to understand what she really wanted from life. 2 weeks after that fateful night, Rebecca returned to the house to pick up the rest of her things. Nash was at work, so she was able to gather what she needed in peace. As she left the house with the last box, she saw Eloise standing by the mailbox. Their eyes met across the street. "Rebecca." Eloise took a step toward her. "How are you?" "Fine," Rebecca replied, putting the box in the trunk. "Considering the circumstances." "We were worried about you," Eloise said. "You didn't answer your messages." "I needed time," Rebecca explained, "to figure out what to do next." "And what did you decide?" Rebecca looked at the house where she had lived for 7 years, the house that would soon be sold, becoming part of the past. "Start over," she said, "somewhere with no memories." Eloise nodded as if she had expected that answer. "Drew and I are leaving too," she said. "This neighborhood, I think we've lived here long enough." Something in her tone made Rebecca wary. "What do you mean?" Eloise shrugged. "It's just time to move on, find new places, new people." Rebecca suddenly remembered Nash's words. "Have you talked to them?" His strange curiosity, as if he knew or suspected something. "Eliza," she said slowly, "you've done this before, haven't you? Found couples like Nash and me and spiced up their lives." Eloise finished with a slight smile. "Maybe, but with you, it was different. You're special, Rebecca." Rebecca didn't know whether to believe her. Were those looks, those touches, those words sincere? Or was it just a game, a well-rehearsed routine? "Goodbye, Eloise," she said, getting into the car. "Good luck in your new place." As she drove away, she saw Eloise standing on the sidewalk in the rearview mirror, watching her go. And there was something so sincere, so sad in that look that for a moment Rebecca almost believed that she really was more than just another toy to the Merediths. The divorce was quick and relatively painless. Nash did not reveal the real reason for their breakup, agreeing to the wording "irreconcilable differences." The house was sold, the money divided, and the belongings distributed. Formally, their marriage was over, although emotionally, both were still reeling from its collapse. Rebecca found a job in another city and a small apartment, which she gradually began to furnish to her liking. It was a strange feeling, living alone, making decisions only for herself, without looking back at another person. It was scary, but also liberating. Sometimes she thought about the Merediths, about what they had given her and what they had taken away, about whether their meeting had been a coincidence or a carefully planned hunt, about whether that temporary freedom had been worth destroying her life. The only thing she was sure of was that she didn't want to pretend anymore. Not to Nash, not to the Merediths, not to herself. Whatever her new life would be, she wanted to live it honestly, openly, completely. Nash had moved too. They hardly spoke except for the occasional message about forgotten items or unresolved financial matters. He seemed to be trying to start over, as if erasing everything related to their life together and its sudden, painful end from his memory. And the Meredith's house was empty again, waiting for new tenants. Perhaps a new couple who would look out of their window, admiring its yellow walls and white shutters, unaware of the stories it hid. 3 months had passed since the divorce. Nash moved to Bridgeport, a small town 40 miles from Greenfield. He rented a modest apartment, found a new job at an engineering firm, and tried to start his life over. In the evenings, he often sat on the balcony, looking at the unfamiliar city and thinking about how quickly life can change. One Saturday, Nash decided to check out a new bar that had opened near his house. The place was nice. Dim lighting, good music, a friendly bartender. Nash ordered a beer and sat down at the bar, watching the other patrons. "Nash? Nash Canfield?" a voice said from his right. Nash turned and saw a middle-aged man who looked vaguely familiar. "Excuse me, do we know each other?" he asked. "Gary Simmons," the man introduced himself. "I used to live in Greenfield on Cedar Street, number 18. My wife and I moved to California about 6 months ago." Nash finally remembered. The Simmonses were neighbors who had lived in the house the Merediths had bought. An elderly couple, they rarely socialized but always said hello when they saw each other. "Yes, now I remember you." Nash nodded. "What brings you to Bridgeport?" "I came to visit my sister," Gary explained. "How are you? Did you move from Greenfield?" Nash briefly described his new life, avoiding the subject of his divorce, but Gary seemed to already know. "I heard you and Rebecca split up," he said. "I'm sorry." "How did you know?" Nash asked, surprised. "My sister still lives in Greenfield," Gary shrugged. "She told me you sold your house and you both moved away. In small towns, everyone knows everything." Nash nodded, not wanting to go into details. "How do you like California?" he asked, trying to change the subject. "It's great," Gary smiled. "The weather is wonderful. The kids are nearby. I just miss my old house sometimes." "By the way, how are the new tenants? I heard a young couple bought our house." Nash felt a lump rise in his throat. Talking about the Merediths was the last thing he wanted to do. "Yes, the Merediths," he said curtly. "But I think they've moved out too." "The Merediths?" Gary frowned. "That's strange. The real estate agent said the Andersons bought the house." Nash raised his eyebrows in surprise. Maybe he got it wrong? Or did they resell the house? The woman's name was Eloise, and the man was Drew. She was a massage therapist and he was a bartender. Gary looked closely at Nash. A tall brunette with long hair and a tattooed guy with his hair in a ponytail? "Yes," Nash confirmed, feeling a chill run down his spine. "Do you know them?" Gary sighed and took a sip from his glass. "Not the Merediths, Canfield, and not the Andersons. The house was bought by the Bakers, a respectable middle-aged couple who run a small organic cosmetics business." "I don't understand," Nash said, confused. "The people who lived in our house—" Gary paused. "They went by different names. When my wife and I lived there, next door to them, they introduced themselves as Mallory and Jack Taylor. And yes, she supposedly worked as a massage therapist, and he was a bartender." Nash felt something tighten in his chest. "What do you mean?" Gary looked at him sympathetically. "They've done this before, Canfield. They find married couples, insinuate themselves into their lives, and destroy their relationships. Miranda and I almost fell victim to them." Nash listened, unable to believe his ears. Gary recounted how this couple, whoever they really were, had appeared in their neighborhood, quickly befriended them and become part of their lives. How they had gradually tried to draw them into their games, using hints and actions to fuel their curiosity and desire. "Miranda and I had been married for almost 30 years, Gary said. "And you know, at one point I almost gave in. That woman, she has a special gift. She sees your weaknesses, your desires, even the ones you don't admit to yourself." "What happened?" Nash asked, feeling a chill run through his body. "We got lucky," Gary said with a bitter smile. "I ran into their former neighbor at the gym. He recognized them from my description and told me what they had done to his friends. The couple got divorced, the husband left town, the wife stayed behind, and the two of them just disappeared, only to show up somewhere else." "And you didn't report it to the police?" Nash asked incredulously. "What would I report?" Gary shrugged. "They don't steal or kill. They just play with people. They exploit their weaknesses, their curiosity, their desire for the forbidden." Technically, they're not breaking any laws. Nash was silent, trying to make sense of what he had heard. All this time, he had thought that his marriage had fallen apart because of a lack of attention, because of routine, because he and Rebecca had grown apart. But now, it turned out that they had become victims of someone else's cruel game. "You know what's the worst part?" Gary continued after a pause. "They're both charming, pleasant, interesting. They know how to listen, how to say exactly what you want to hear. And they seem to really enjoy what they're doing. It's not just sex or power, it's the process of destroying other people's lives." "What did you do when you found out?" Nash asked. "Miranda and I decided to leave," Gary replied. "Our children had been asking us to move to California for a long time, and we finally agreed. We sold the house and left. And to be honest, I was glad to hear that the new owners moved out quickly too." So these two moved on, looking for new victims. Nash finished his beer and ordered another. His head was spinning from the information he had received. He remembered every detail of his interactions with the Merediths, how quickly they had furnished the house, as if they knew they wouldn't be there long, how they studied him and Rebecca, looking for cracks in their relationship, how skillfully they played on Rebecca's weaknesses, her thirst for freedom and new experiences. "I heard they're in Riverside now," Gary said suddenly. "My sister said a mutual friend saw them there. Now they're the Nielsen's, gallery owners in New York." "Gallery owners," Nash smiled bitterly. "No longer a masseuse and a bartender." "They adapt to their environment," Gary nodded. "To the people they work with. Professions, names, stories. Everything changes. Only handwriting remains the same." They talked for about another hour. Gary told him everything he knew about this strange couple, and Nash shared his story, leaving out the most painful details. When they said goodbye, Gary put his hand on Nash's shoulder. "Don't blame yourself, man, and Rebecca too. These people are professionals. They know what they're doing." "Do you think they'll ever stop?" Nash asked. "I doubt it." Gary shook his head. "It's like a drug to them. They'll keep going until they get old or they run into someone who won't let them off as easily as we did." After meeting with Gary, Nash walked the streets of Bridgeport for a long time, trying to process everything he had learned. Part of him was angry at himself, at Rebecca, at the Merediths, or whatever their real names were. Another part felt a strange sense of relief. What had happened to their marriage wasn't just the result of cooling feelings or a lack of attention. It was a planned attack, a carefully thought-out scenario. When he got home, he sat in front of the phone for a long time, wondering whether to call Rebecca. She had a right to know, but what difference would it make? Their marriage was ruined, their house was sold, their lives had gone their separate ways. Perhaps the truth would only cause her more pain. In the end, he decided not to call. Let the past remain in the past. They both needed to move on, let go of what had happened, and build new lives. That same evening, 60 miles from Bridgeport, in an elegant loft in downtown Riverside, Eloise and Drew, now known as Nina and Marcus Nielsen, were hosting a small reception. Among the guests was a married couple. He was a literature professor at a local college. She was a florist and owner of a small shop. They had been married for 15 years, had 2 teenage children, and led a quiet, measured life. "We're so glad you could come," Nina said, filling the professor's wife's glass with expensive wine. "Marcus has told us so much about you since you met at the gallery." "We don't get out much," the woman smiled shyly. "Work, children. You know how it is." "Oh, of course," Nina nodded understandingly. "Routine can be a drag, but sometimes it's so important to break out of it and try something new." Marcus was discussing contemporary art with the professor, standing in front of a large abstract painting. "You have excellent taste," said the professor. "This collection, it's impressive." "Thank you," smiled Marcus. "Nina and I love art in all its forms." especially the kind that goes beyond the ordinary, challenges conventions. They exchanged glances across the room. Nina and Marcus, he and she, whoever they really were. Their eyes betrayed understanding, anticipation, the excitement of hunters who had spotted potential prey. Later, when the guests had left, they sat on the terrace of their loft, sipping wine and looking at the city at night. "They're a good match," she said. "Especially her. She has so much unrealized passion, so much curiosity that she herself is unaware of. He's interesting too," he nodded. "Underneath the mask of a staid professor, there's a man hungry for adventure. I saw the way he looked at you." "How long will it take this time?" she asked. "A month, maybe 2, he shrugged. "They're more conservative than the Kenfields. We'll have to move slower, more carefully." She smiled, remembering Rebecca, her curiosity, her gradual immersion into their world, her final surrender. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "sometimes I almost feel sorry for them. They're so fragile, so predictable." "But that doesn't stop you," he remarked. "No," she agreed. "It never has, and neither does it stop you." They raised their glasses, silently toasting their next game, their next victims. For them, it wasn't just a form of entertainment or a source of sexual pleasure. It was a way of life, an art, a drug they couldn't live without. Far away from them, in 2 different cities, 2 people, Nash and Rebecca, were trying to pick up the pieces of their broken lives. One now knew the truth. The other continued to believe that their marriage had fallen apart due to routine and alienation. Both were trying to move on, forget the past, and start over. But sometimes, on quiet nights when sleep wouldn't come, they both thought about that strange period in their lives, about the house with yellow walls and white shutters, about the couple who had appeared in their lives so suddenly and changed them forever, about the temptation that was so easy to give into and so hard to resist. And maybe, somewhere deep down, they both understood one simple truth. Even the strongest fortress can fall if the attack is directed at its most vulnerable points. Even the most solid relationships can be destroyed if temptation creeps in, skillfully directed by those who have made destruction their art.